Aloha, we are in Maui, this beautiful island, at the Snapdragon Summit 2023, and we are excited to be here. We saw a lot of announcements from flagship Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 to the latest PC computing platform from Qualcomm, Snapdragon X Elite. We are here with Durga Malladi, who is SVP and GM for technology planning and edge solutions. So Durga, happy to be here with you. And over the course, like we have seen and heard a lot about over the years, like how we have evolved from more of leadership in connectivity and mobile compute, and now we're extending it to broader devices, right? So it's beyond mobile, which is like now PC and then automotive. So can you talk about what has changed with respect to entering this at this right now? And everyone talks about AI being that particular technology which will drive the compute to the next level. So if you can elaborate more on what Qualcomm is doing in this space.
All right, first of all, thanks for having me here. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. We are at a transformative moment in the industry where, as Qualcomm, we are on a singular mission to bring generative AI running on devices, democratizing the usage of generative AI in every kind of a device. Uh, at Snapdragon Summit, there's a lot of emphasis and focus on our Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 platform, on handsets, our X Elite platform and compute segment, and as we go a little bit further into XR segment. But when we talk of democratization of AI running on devices, generative AI running on devices, that extends all the way to consumer and industrial IoT in the IoT domain, and on the other extreme in the automotive domain. So it's important to kind of understand why. Why is generative AI running on device this important? Why can't we simply run it on the cloud? We believe there are several driving factors associated with it. On one hand, the way that we start running generative AI in the cloud, if everyone starts using it exactly the way that we envision, the economics simply don't work out. The cost becomes prohibitively expensive at some point in time. Latency then starts making a big impact in terms of the user experience. But the other way of thinking about this is that when we think of generative AI running on devices, we start out with privacy and security of the data remaining on the device in itself. A lot of the things that we do, whether it's consumer use cases or productivity use cases, they're sensitive information, so we want to run it on device. But the biggest driving factor with this is that when you take a look at some of the really large models that have started making an impact in terms of what potential use cases can be built on top of it, we are in that unique position in time where, as Qualcomm, we have managed to make sure that these large models run on device at the right level of power consumption, very low power consumption. The memory footprint happens to be very low. And on top of that, all the other KPIs like latency are met in the most adequate manner. In that sense, if you are a developer today, the first thing that you have to ask yourself is, if you have use cases, what kind of use cases can I run on devices? So we are at that moment right now, and that's why it's truly exciting times for us right here at the Snapdragon Summit.
It's fantastic. So I would like to ask, we talked about a lot of on-device AI. So how Qualcomm is trying to achieve, we saw the benchmarks, right? And those were like mind-blowing benchmarks. Like you're beating the competition almost 2x on performance and almost 70 to 80% on power, right? So how are you eking out such efficiency? Can you let us know about the secret sauce?
From Qualcomm's perspective, working in a constrained environment, historically, we've always been kind of focused on smartphones is probably the best example of where we have all sorts of constraints. There is a constraint on power consumption. There's only so much that you can actually draw from a battery standpoint. The memory footprint is constrained. So we've always been driving low power compute solutions, but high performance, low power and high performance compute solutions in a smartphone. And that has kind of worked in our favor in the sense that generative AI just happens to be the latest chapter in a long-running sequence of milestones that we've had in AI. 10 years back or so, when we first started bringing in AI algorithms, they were really focused on cameras, so image stabilization, the way that we would do photo editing and whatnot. These were the earliest convolutional networks. So we learned a lot along that way. Maybe about 6 or 7 years back, we started bringing in AI algorithms in audio processing, whether it's with earbuds or anything else, noise cancellation and what have you. So generative AI in that sense, as we entered this domain and we started looking at these extremely large models, you saw us talk about 7 billion parameter models with Llama 2 running on device. There are demos that are out there which illustrate what can be done. 13 plus billion parameter models running on our X Elite platform and compute segment. These are phenomenal capabilities, but we've kind of learned our ropes along the way, and we believe in that sense we're uniquely positioned to drive the next evolution of generative AI into devices. The key part is that this has not been something that just started like 1 or 2 years back. Even though generative AI, we noticed the fact that from opening up everyone's eyes as to what is the potential capabilities of it, people started paying attention to it in 2 years. But we've been at it for about a decade now, and in that sense, it's a unique strength that we have in this space.
Great. So you have built up foundation and the plumbing for the ecosystem to build applications, intelligent applications for all the devices, right, across. You have the AI engine, which can do heterogeneous compute, very powerful NPU, right? On the system level, I think it was 75 TOPS for the Elite X, right? So that is one part. So that is done. What about the ecosystem? So how are you working with Microsoft, Android, different developers, right, to empower them to build the solutions at scale?
Working with ecosystem and the rest of the ecosystem in AI space is extremely critical, and we're kind of fortunate in this sense that we have a lot of strong partners in this space. But I want to unpack that a little bit further. There are multiple kinds of partners associated with us in this space. First of all, we're in the business of ingesting any model that anyone actually develops out there. Some of the popular sites today, if you take a look at them, there's more than 350,000 models. From Qualcomm standpoint, we are at the way that we think about it is bring your own model. And we would like to go ahead and implement that model into our devices. That's the simplest way to think about it. Which means when we talk of partners like Meta and Microsoft and Google, they all have their foundational models that they have been working on. As Qualcomm, our objective is to onboard every single one of those models in the cleanest and the simplest possible manner, making sure that they run effectively in our platforms. In addition to that, what we recognized is that the use cases themselves, there's no such thing as a use case that is built upon a single model. Typically, a use case involves a combination of models, multiple models running concurrently, which means we need to have a strong lineup of best-in-class processors.
Sure.
Our CPU, which we talked about it quite extensively, and we'll talk about it a little bit more today. Our CPU, our GPU, and our NPU, they all have their own strengths that they bring to the table. And our objective is to make sure that we are in a position to run all three processors concurrently as these models are run on top of it, built upon a use case. Then the second set of partners in this ecosystem are the developers themselves, and there are multiple kinds of developers. A lot of the times we have OEMs themselves bringing up their apps. You saw Xiaomi talked about, in fact, they have their own model, the 6 billion version of a model, and they have their application running on top of that model. So that's one kind of developers. Those are OEMs. And then we have third-party developers who are not necessarily associated either with the OS or with the OEM, but it's just third-party application. It just runs on top. It's quite prevalent in so many different areas. In IoT space, it's quite extensive. Sure. So we work with everyone in that space. And you touched upon an important point over here about onboarding these developers. From our standpoint, our AI offering is a combination of our best-in-class processors, which can ingest these models, and the software stack that makes it extremely easy for developers to then start writing use cases and applications on top of it. So the software stack is a key attribute to everything that we offer over here. So in that sense, our objective is to make sure that any developer out there, it's extremely easy for them to start thinking of use cases on our platforms.
That's fantastic. Yeah, we met a few developers yesterday, and we were like astonished on how they're doing. Especially we see a lot of use cases on productivity side, editing side. Microsoft was also on stage talking about Copilot and how they can optimize for based on the silicon, right? So that's fantastic. Another thing which I wanted to touch upon is Qualcomm has been leader in 5G, right? So how do you see 5G and AI blending together? And is it a new form of computing and connectivity together in how we interact with the devices? As we were interacting in 2G for voice and I would say SMS, in 3G and 4G it was more of applications, right? And now are we going to see applications going away and it will be more AI driven and intelligent? As you yesterday also mentioned, the application goes in the background, you invoke whatever you need with a voice. So can you talk about this, how we are going
Sure.
to use the device?
So first things first, when it comes to the usage of AI in multiple domains, I mentioned the fact that AI made a big difference when it came to image processing and video processing, gradually into audio processing. But it has also started making a pretty big impact in communications. Classical signal theory, that's signal processing, which has been used in our modem RF platforms for a long period of time. We already recognize the immense potential that AI has in terms of further enhancing what we already know very well inside the modem RF platforms. So earlier this year, in our X75 modem RF platform in Mobile World Congress in Barcelona, in that announcement, we introduced world's first dedicated AI tensor accelerator embedded right in the middle of our modem RF platform. It's a recognition of the fact that now AI applications or AI-based algorithms start improving even our modem RF platform performance quite a bit, whether it's in power consumption, in throughput, in millimeter wave beamforming, and position fix when it comes to location services and whatnot. So moving forward, as we think about it, AI is a technology that is all pervasive. It is beginning to make an influence into, or it's influencing every single technology aspect that we see inside the platforms that we're talking about, whether it's modems or whether it is signal processing in image and audio, or use cases on top of it. Now, specifically about these use cases, what changes? Why is it a transformative moment in the industry today? We talked about it a little bit yesterday, but just to kind of think through, devices today, when we use devices, a lot of the times we have to directly interface with the device in a far more extensive manner, which means you have to invoke the apps, you have to run the apps in a specific way. What if we have a much simpler interface to the same device in which the apps get abstracted behind the scenes? They're still running behind the scenes, except that from a user standpoint, it is so much simpler to simply use voice. Instead of, in one of the demonstrations that we have, instead of making an airline reservation, which would involve us going through either one of the travel apps or one of the airline apps, you simply state, I want to go from city A to B if city A to B on a certain day, and find a reservation for me, and that's all that you say. Makes it so much easier for the device to for the end user to get that information back, and we can do it today. It's running on a combination of models in which you can make such reservations, and that's just a starting point. The simplification of the user interface towards the device is probably one of the biggest things that we will see moving forwards as AI starts abstracting out all the complexity for the end user. Makes a big difference for a large number of consumers. A lot of us in this summit are pretty tech savvy, so we know how to navigate our way across. But if you were to say, tell your mom, hey, you can make an airline reservation like that, that's a big difference. There's a vast majority of people who are not yet fully comfortable with the extreme amount of technology that we put into devices, and this is like a phenomenal opportunity in that sense. So really looking forward to this.
That's great. So being a tech executive who has seen everything from connectivity, now compute and AI, leading this effort, what would be your top 2 use cases which you feel are close to your heart and say are disruptive for this decade?
Well, for the entire decade, it's a little bit hard to actually put it that way, but I can already say that really excited about 2 kind of domains in which we can make this difference. The first one is productivity tools. There's a lot of mundane work that we end up doing, whether it's pulling out meeting notes from someone that we met 2 weeks back and trying to draft an email from that. There's a lot of manual processing involved. one of the simplest productivity tools that simply fetches that information, puts the right context, and drafts an email for you. That's only the starting point. Usage of voice a lot more. We talked about usage of voice with a smartphone, which hopefully we will start calling it more of an AI phone. Instead of a smartphone that has AI, it's actually an AI phone that has all the technology underneath. Using voice with other devices as well. This includes your laptops for sure, but also at home for IoT devices, consumer IoT devices, whether it's your doorbell that recognizes your face and unlocks the door for you, or whether it is a lot of these IoT use cases rely upon AI technology to make life simpler. So tremendous opportunity over there. Productivity and these consumer use cases. The other one, and we are only beginning to briefly get started. If I just take a broad perspective on AI, and this goes a little bit beyond what we talked about for handsets and compute, is there's immense potential as we start harnessing the power of AI into other domains like medicine, for example, or whether it's we talked about travel logistics, but that's only the beginnings of it. Healthcare and medicine and so on. There's tremendous potential there. So really looking forward to that. As Qualcomm, as we said, we have a very strong role to play with our presence in the edge devices, where these generative AI algorithms constantly run in the background. We should think of AI not as an on-demand technology. You ask for something and you get a response, but rather as something that is pervasive, constantly running in the background, extracting your context and making life simpler for you.
Correct. Look forward to a pervasive phone in future where AI goes in the background. So I think we can call a smartphone no longer smartphone but intelligent phone or AI phone, as you said, or in the era of AI PCs also beckons. So
yes,
yeah. Last question from me: do you see generative AI proliferating more in PCs or phone?
We see across the board, and when we say across the board, not just across the kinds of devices, but also the tiers of devices, from the highest premier tier to all the way down to the lowest tier that we can think of. That holds true for all kinds of devices. Obviously, starting with handsets and compute segment first.
Correct. Thank you very much, Durga.
All right.
Nice having you.
Thanks. All right. Yep. Bye.